What happens when a global superpower is told to pack up and leave? When a country says, "We don't want your tanks, your jets, your troops on our land." This isn't fiction, it's real history. Today, we're revealing the stories of 7 countries that expelled U.S. military bases, defying the world's most powerful military force. And we'll explore how Donald Trump, a man obsessed with loyalty and strength, responded. Number 1. The Philippines. A clash over sovereignty. In 1991, the Philippine Senate delivered a shocking decision. It refused to renew the military bases agreement with the United States, ending nearly a century-long presence. This meant the closure of Clark Air Base, once the largest U.S. Air Force base outside the mainland, and Subic Bay Naval Base, a key Pacific stronghold. Why? Because Filipino leaders and citizens had grown tired of being treated like a junior partner. Many believed that the U.S. presence was a relic of colonialism, an echo of a time when the Philippines wasn't fully in control of its own land. Adding fuel to the fire were reports of environmental damage, criminal incidents involving U.S. personnel, and the U.S.'s refusal to recognize Philippine jurisdiction over those troops. Donald Trump, decades later, criticized the withdrawal, calling it a strategic blunder, and warning that it allowed China to dominate the South China Sea unchecked. Number 2. Venezuela. Anti-imperialism in action. In the early 2000s, Hugo Chavez, Venezuela's socialist president, made it crystal clear. He wanted nothing to do with American military presence. Chavez accused the U.S. of spying, manipulating elections, and using military cooperation to suppress independence in Latin America. He severed all ties with the U.S. military and kicked out American troops. The U.S. Southern Command, once active in joint operations, was shut out completely. But Chavez didn't stop there. He embraced Russia, China, and Iran, creating an anti-U.S. coalition that defied Washington openly. Trump, when asked about Chavez's legacy, labeled it dangerous nationalism, blaming Venezuela's direction on weak leadership from past administrations and calling it a security threat to the region. Number 3. Iraq. A costly fallout. Iraq's story is unique. The U.S. military had a massive presence there, not as guests, but as occupiers, nation builders, and later, allies. By 2020, after nearly 17 years of boots on the ground, things came to a head. The assassination of Iranian General Qasem Soleimani and Iraqi militia leader Abu Mahdi al-Muhandis by a U.S. drone strike near Baghdad airport was the tipping point. The Iraqi parliament, in an emergency session, voted to expel all U.S. troops from the country. Many Iraqis saw the strike as a breach of sovereignty, and mass protests followed, demanding full withdrawal of American forces. Trump, outraged, refused to back down. He threatened sanctions, demanded billions in repayment, and warned that the U.S. wouldn't leave without being compensated. The situation exposed deep fractures in what was once called a partnership. Number 4. Uzbekistan. When human rights and strategy collide. The U.S. found a valuable ally in Uzbekistan after 9/11. The Kyrgyzstan base, or K2, became a hub for military operations in Afghanistan. But in 2005, things changed. The Uzbek government, led by Islam Karimov, carried out a violent crackdown on protesters in the city of Andijan. Hundreds were killed. Washington responded with sharp condemnation. Karimov, enraged, saw it as Western interference in domestic affairs. He gave the U.S. 180 days to vacate K2, ending a crucial military partnership. Trump, years later, expressed skepticism about letting moral lectures interfere with military priorities, arguing that strategic relationships shouldn't collapse over internal disputes. Number 5. Kyrgyzstan, the Russian factor. Tucked deep in the heart of Central Asia, the small but strategically critical nation of Kyrgyzstan became a quiet battleground in the global power struggle between the United States and Russia. After the 9/11 attacks, the U.S. scrambled to build a network of military bases close to Afghanistan. One of the most vital links in that chain was the Manas Air Base, located just outside the capital, Bishkek. Opened in 2001, Manas quickly became a logistical powerhouse, a transit hub for troops, supplies, and refueling operations. At its peak, over 1,000 U.S. personnel were stationed there, and nearly 98% of troops deploying to Afghanistan passed through its gates. But Manas was more than a pit stop. It symbolized the American footprint in a region long dominated by Russian influence, a presence that Moscow never liked. As early as 2005, the cracks began to show. In that year after the Tulip Revolution, Kyrgyzstan's new leadership began reconsidering its relationship with the West. Russia saw an opportunity. Reports emerged that Moscow offered Kyrgyzstan over $2 billion in loans, aid, and discounted fuel in exchange for closing the U.S. base. Behind closed doors, the pressure mounted. Then came the official announcement in 2009. Kyrgyzstan's government would terminate the U.S. lease at Manas. But after U.S. negotiators offered a massive increase in rent, tripling the payment from $17 million to $60 million a year, the decision was reversed. Manas survived, for a while. But by 2014, under continued Russian pressure, the Kyrgyz parliament finally voted to close the base permanently. The site was swiftly converted into a civilian airport, ending over 13 years of U.S. military operations. This wasn't just a matter of national pride or diplomatic alignment. It was a clear geopolitical message. In post-Soviet space, Russia was reclaiming dominance. And America? It was being shown the exit. Trump, observing this shift years later, saw it not just as a loss of a base, but as a symbol of America's weakening influence. He warned that the U.S. was losing ground to Russia without a shot being fired. Number 6. France. An ally with a mind of its own. Now let's turn the clock back. Not just decades, but to a moment that stunned Washington. The year was 1966. In a move that shook the foundations of Western unity, President Charles de Gaulle of France made a bold announcement. France would be withdrawing from NATO's integrated military command and ordering all American troops and bases to leave French territory. De Gaulle's reason? He believed Europe should have strategic autonomy, not permanent dependence on the United States. He didn't want French decisions shaped in Washington or its nuclear arsenal tied to American approval. It was not a hostile act, but it was deeply symbolic and controversial. Thousands of U.S. troops were relocated, many to Germany, as the U.S. scrambled to adjust its NATO posture. Decades later, Trump would repeatedly point to this moment as proof that European allies had long histories of abandoning shared defense burdens. In speeches, he asked, "Why should America keep paying the bill for countries that make their own rules and rely on us when it's convenient?" Number 7. Thailand. A quiet departure. In contrast to France's dramatic exit and Kyrgyzstan's geopolitical tug-of-war, Thailand's departure from hosting U.S. bases was more gradual but just as telling. During the Vietnam War, Thailand was a cornerstone of U.S. strategy in Southeast Asia. The U.S. built and operated 7 major air bases, including Utapao, Takli, and Korat, from which thousands of bombing missions were launched over Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia. At the time, the U.S. military presence in Thailand exceeded 50,000 personnel. But when Saigon fell in 1975, everything began to change. Thai society, deeply affected by the war's brutality, began questioning its alignment with the United States. Massive student protests, fueled by nationalism and anti-war sentiment, swept through Bangkok. The Thai government began to rethink its position. By the late 1970s, the U.S. had withdrawn from all but a few sites, eventually turning over most installations to Thai control. Unlike in other cases, this wasn't about dramatic speeches or hostile tensions. It was a quiet negotiation, one that reflected Thailand's desire to remain neutral in Cold War rivalries. Today, the U.S. and Thailand still maintain strong ties, including joint exercises like Cobra Gold. But the days of full-scale American bases? Long gone. Trump, during regional defense summits, reportedly questioned Thailand's reliability and expressed concern that too many allies were reaping benefits while doing very little. So, what do these stories reveal? That even the world's greatest military power, with unmatched weapons, reach, and resources, is not invincible when it comes to diplomatic will. These 7 countries each made a sovereign choice. Some chose freedom from dependency, others wanted neutrality or to shift toward other powers, and some simply said, "Not on our land anymore." Donald Trump, ever focused on loyalty and leverage, viewed these moments as betrayals, signs that American generosity was being taken for granted. In his words, if they don't want us there, they don't deserve our protection. But for the nations that made these choices, the message was clear. We are independent, not pawns.